Hello all and welcome. I'm the MGTOW Philosopher, and in today's video I would like to talk about leaving the plantation and why it's okay for women to do so. Now of course it's not okay with me, but for the vast majority of society it's not a big problem. They don't care. In fact, they see it as a good thing. Women are now liberated, where before they were kept prisoners. Really? Now let's look at exactly how women were kept prisoners, okay? Women of the past were told by some busybody loser ladies who couldn't find husbands of their own or who'd had bad marriages in the past that being a wife was akin to indentured servitude. It's the old misery loves company scenario, essentially. They were told that their lot in life as a woman was unfair and akin to slavery. Ooh. They were told that being a housewife was drudgery, that while they were spending all their time at home slaving away to take care of their husband and their kids, that the man was out there seeing the world, having exciting adventures, and living his life. Now, first off, let me just say that while a woman's life may have indeed consisted of a lot of drudgery in the 19th and early 20th centuries, once the advent of cheap household appliances came along, their lives were nothing of the sort. As for the man's lot, his life was actually far more drudgery than the woman's, as he worked grueling hours, often 6, even 7 days a week, sometimes 16 hours a day, under horrific and oftentimes dangerous conditions. The drudgery for the man, as with the woman, receded greatly with further industrialization, to the point where today, on average, a man's workday is just 8 hours. Still, it's far more than any housewife of today would have to work, and there's no risk of her losing her job if she forgets to do the laundry. Therefore, the reality of the past was that both men and women had lives of drudgery, that they were, in a sense, shackled to their gender roles. Now, men went out to do grueling jobs that oftentimes killed them, and certainly those jobs contributed to shorter lifespans, while women stayed at home, pounding bread dough, churning butter, and hand-washing clothes. So, both had it rough, but the men had it rougher, and he still does have it rougher to this very day by any objective standard. So, if that was and still is the case, what was and what is it that women need to be liberated from? And what did they need to be liberated from in the past? Why was it okay for them to leave the proverbial plantation? After all, both her and her husband were slaves, right? They were slaves to each other. Now, this is an interesting question. Why is it? How could women not see that their husbands were servants to their families in the exact same way that she, as the wife and mother, was also a servant to the family? How could she, as the wife, not see that he worked all day to accumulate the necessary resources to feed, clothe, and house her and their children? And that she, as the wife, who was weaker and less productive, was left to do the tasks that were best suited to her, seeing as she makes the breast milk, after all, and will be the only source of food for those babies for the first couple of years of their lives. How could the woman miss the fact that she was no more or less a slave than he was? How, you might ask? Well, because women are egocentric creatures who, by and large, are only concerned with themselves. Their lack of empathy and abstract thinking abilities makes understanding even the most simple comparisons between men and women all but impossible. Women cannot and never have been able to see the man as indebted and enslaved to his family. Oh no, because he's so strong and therefore he's not a victim. But poor little me, I'm a victim. No, it cannot be that they're both victims of each other's needs, which means that neither are victims at all, as they are both in the situation they are in by choice. Oh no, it can't be that. That narrative, you see, that narrative doesn't justify walking away from your role, your gender role as a wife. No, we can't do that. You can't walk away from your role. No. Not if that's the narrative. I have to stay home all day while my lucky man gets to go out and see the world, talk to people and have fun and adventures, while I'm stuck here, stuck at home wondering what adventures he might be having. Yeah, that just sucks, doesn't it, honey? You want to know what adventures he was having, you dizzy broad? He was 200 meters underground digging coal out of the rock with nothing more than a pickaxe and getting black lung that would kill him before the age of 35. That's the big adventure he was having. He was destroying his body to the point where even if black lung or cancer didn't kill him, he would probably end up dying well before his time just because he so often drank so much in fact, to escape the misery that was his daily lot in life. Or one day his body just gave out. Misery that you, for the most part, escaped as you bitched and moaned about how boring your day of baking bread and washing some clothes was. Oh, poor you, poor you. So what exactly justified women escaping the plantation and leaving the man to continue being the proverbial workhorse while she just booked it for the nearest airport to escape him and her responsibilities while he has to continue slaving away so he could pay her money even after she'd left him? Or she booked it for the nearest factory job, or as they so often do today, the nearest office building to shuffle papers, thereby escaping their so-called drudgery and boredom to take jobs away from men who could do those jobs far better. What justifies this hypocrisy? That men must continue to work and slave away on the plantation for the women, and they never achieve freedom, whilst she leaves him without a whit of concern for him or anything else, except that monthly alimony check that she'll get from him, of course. What could possibly justify that kind of hypocrisy on her part? Why, nothing, of course. Nothing justifies such behavior. Nothing at all. Now, of course, feminists will tell you that women were slaves to their husbands for centuries, millennia even. Imagine that. And that they were somehow oppressed by them. Yes, the woman was forced to stay at home, cook all day, clean clothes, and manage the household. Hence, because they were serving their man and their kids, they were slaves to that man. And yeah. By the way, isn't it funny how you never hear about how she was enslaved to the kids as well? It's always just the man she was enslaved to. Interesting. Anyhow, this entire argument is a stupid one, as it only stands up if the so-called oppression is one-sided. But if one looks more closely at the argument, one will see that the oppression was equal at the very least, and both were oppressing each other, if we go by the feminist definition of oppression. For you see, if you apply feminist oppression logic to men, then we see that he also was oppressed. He was forced to go out every day and do back-breaking labor for his boss and for his family. So he was doubly oppressed. Not only was he out there working for his family, i.e. to support them with food, clothing, and housing they needed, but he was serving an overseer in the form of a boss as well. A boss who he had to please or be fired by. Now, feminists would have you believe that this is the relationship that existed between men and women, this overseer-slave dynamic. However, this idea quickly evaporates under even cursory inspection. Why is that? Because men could not simply fire their wives. But if the man gets fired from his job, the family would have ended up out in the cold starving to death. You see, the severity of the possible outcomes between man and wife and man and boss are so different that calling a woman a slave to her man is nonsense. She was no more a slave to him than he was to her. And this so-called oppressor-oppressed dynamic is even less true in today's world, since she can just up and quit the marriage at any time and take everything, including his shit. However, the pressure and responsibility on the man's shoulders was and is really twofold when compared to hers, which was comprised of a single focus, her family. Yet her husband had dual concerns, his family and his work. He had to serve both and please both, while she didn't actually have to please anyone, as there were no dire consequences if she was a crappy wife, at least not usually. Yet, she was somehow oppressed more. How does that work exactly? Men not only served their bosses outside of their family, but they had to serve their family as well. Women served the family, and that was it. Yeah, both were oppressed in the sense that they both served each other. Yet women nowadays spread the false dogma that women were oppressed throughout history and men were the oppressors, which implies they were never oppressed. This was only half true, as men were oppressed by women throughout history, and doubly so, as they were forced to go out and be oppressed by a boss man as well as their wife. You see, feminists only tell you half the story because A, that's what they've been taught to regurgitate, and B, because the truth is inconvenient and doesn't justify them leaving the plantation. But why did society, essentially the big Uber mama, allow this to happen? I mean, it won't allow men to leave the plantation. Why were women allowed to just up and walk away? I mean, can you imagine what would happen if men tried en masse to leave and throw off the shackles of their oppression? There'd be mass panic and anarchy, as the system wouldn't be able to fund itself without our resources. I mean, hell, the Western world would just collapse, and we might very well end up in a new Dark Ages. Okay, seriously though, hyperbole aside, why is it that women are allowed to just walk away from their responsibilities while men can't? Are not both oppressed? The answer is yes, by the way, if you don't already know that. Are not both, in essence, slaves to their families, with the man a slave to both his wife, kids, and boss, while she is just a slave to him and the kids? The answer here is also yes. Now, these things being the case, why did men not free themselves long ago? And at the very least, liberate themselves from the slavery that was their family? Well, okay, that's another subject and another video. As for why women were allowed to do so, well, I'll tell you why. Because women are not as important to society as men. That's right. Let me say it again. Women are not as important to society as men. Women are less important by far to the functioning of society. Now, I bet some of you social justice warrior, feminist meathead morons out there don't like hearing that. If that's the case, maybe you should go run to your safe spaces and hide from reality, I don't know, for 2 or 3 decades. But that's right. Men are more important and more productive than women. I mean, really, is anybody really surprised when I say that or to hear it? And that's why women can just run off the plantation and it's, no big deal. Just let the man pick up the slack, right? And that's all it is. The world can do without women in their traditional roles, at least on the surface. But without men, no way. The world wouldn't last a week. I mean, let's look at a woman's work on the typical plantation in the here and now. Cleaning. Big deal. Run a vacuum cleaner over the floor, throw some pop bottles in the bin, and you're done. Cooking. Toss a couple Hungry Man dinners in the microwave, or heat up some canned spaghetti. Done. Big friggin' deal. Washing the clothes. Really? Pick them up, toss them in the machine, job done. Once washed, pick up again, toss in another machine, push a button, job done. The hardest part of washing clothes these days is hanging them up or folding them. We all know that. What about paying the bills? Did women ever actually do this? No. The man does that. You don't let a woman handle money if you're smart. And that's it. Except for, the big one, child rearing. Okay. Well, that's the one job that takes some actual work. But nowadays, you can just send the kid to daycare, then go to Starbucks for your Frappuccino. Meanwhile, the most important job you will ever have is getting raised by strangers, and later on by the state, while you live out your dreams of becoming as powerful as a man, which you already were to begin with. And that's it. That is being a woman in the modern day world. Oppressed much, is she? I would say princess instead. A housewife today has so few duties that she is living like a frickin' queen. A few simple tasks, and the rest of her time is leisure. A tiny bit of work for your husband, who isn't a work boss, in exchange for food, clothing, shelter, and money. And you call that oppression? Really? Really? What about him? He's serving you by going out to work and provide you with everything you need, and he's serving a boss to boot. Oh, but that's acceptable oppression, because that's a man's job to be oppressed, don't you know? Wait, what? What about your job as a woman? And why on earth are you complaining about the little bit of work that you have to do as a housewife? Oh, right. Leftist indoctrination, revisionist history, and lack of critical thinking skills. Silly me, I forgot. You know, folks, women are natural parasites. They can't do the double duty that men do. You could call it double duty oppression. Well, they can't do it. They don't have the mental fortitude or the stamina. When they try to serve both a boss and their family, they do it poorly. But they just wanted to be free of those mundane, nay, boring tasks that involved being a housewife. They wanted to be free of that shit. And they wanted to be in positions of authority, like they perceive men as having been. Yeah, okay. And that's really why they wanted to escape the plantation, because it was boring. Oh, this is so boring. And their tiny minds thought that their husbands were experiencing so much more of the world and having a lot more fun than they were. Yeah, because he would go to the pub again, get drunk after work with his buddies. You know, that wasn't so much about fun as it was blowing off steam and relieving some of the aches and pains caused by his constant work to serve you and those kids who oppress him daily. But you as a woman don't see that. Nor did women see that when feminism started to rear its ugly head in the late 19th and early parts of the 20th century. Oh, no. All women saw was the man leaving the house, and she was stuck at home. Oh, poor you. You're so oppressed. You know, that oppression bullshit was just spoon-fed to women by angry old cunts who wanted their younger counterparts to be as lonely and miserable as they were. They wanted so much misery and loneliness that as an ideology, feminism has spread to the four corners of the world. And it's an evil ideology, people, one that teaches women to view men as their oppressors simply because they're in a relationship with them where they each work to help the other achieve their goals. Oh, that's so horrible. You're oppressing me. Yeah, where two people are helping each other to improve their mutual situation. But that's oppression. Yes, you evil men. It's an ideology that teaches that having kids is oppression and having a man is oppression. But the oppression is only one-sided, of course. And you, of course, are not oppressing him equally. Oh, no. No, it's all about you and it's all self-serving. And that's really all feminism is, self-serving garbage. And it's garbage designed to bring about unhappiness. Before feminism, women were happy. But today, they're miserable, as they've been convinced that men had it better and still have it better. So they need to become more like men and do all the same things that men do. Sadly, they failed to see that it wasn't a choice that led to the prior gender roles. It wasn't about choice. No, it was about nature. You see, society, for thousands of years, has shaped itself to fit that which was most natural and beneficial for its survival. That meant men going out to hunt, to farm, to work, while women, who were far inferior to men in all these regards, stayed in the cave, the mud hut, the home, taking care of the kids and the household. That's what works, and that's why things evolved to be that way. But today, women are allowed to play at being men because of the technology that has freed so many of us from drudgery, technology that has removed much of the menial labor aspects of life and has allowed women to enter the workforce and work alongside men, albeit in a handicapped way, meaning they do the jobs worse than men, but can still do them to a certain extent. So all this bullshit talk of oppression, of servitude to men is just that, bullshit. In truth, the man is far more oppressed than the woman. But he cannot be freed because he's too valuable to the system. He's far too productive. Even in today's modern world, he's necessary. But the woman isn't. Hence, she can leave her servitude on the plantation while the man must stay behind and continue to slave away, doubly oppressed by both her kids, and his work boss because the system can't do without him. It's as simple as that, guys. The system can do without women, but it can't do without us. But what the system can't do without in regards to her is her votes. So it kowtows and panders to women and tries to give them whatever the hell they want in exchange for those votes. Hence, women's current dominance in society and, in turn, society's current decline. Now, to all you dumb male feminists out there who believe that women are oppressed, you're an idiot. To those women out there who think you're somehow oppressed in today's society, you're also idiots. Yeah, you've been liberated. Don't you get it? You've been freed from bondage to your husbands and your children. You've been freed from your obligations as women so that you can live for yourselves and no one else. Free to do whatever you want in exchange for your votes and your continued support for whatever dullard is currently in office. You now have no obligations to either men or a family in regards to your traditional role as a woman. And yet, funnily enough, statistically speaking, you're unhappier than ever before. You see, those old biddies who pushed for this shit back in the 19th and early 20th century were miserable. That's why they pushed it on their contemporaries in the first place. They wanted them miserable too. And the fatties and ugly women of today, well, they're also miserable. So they pushed this shit on you because misery loves company, and boy, are you miserable. But you still have it easier than a man. Just imagine how your life would be if you actually had it as hard as a man, but were still a woman. You wouldn't be able to take it. Even if you have a family now and you work, you still have it easier than a man. You have more welfare available to you, more support for you in terms of public and governmental programs, an easier job where your male coworkers pick up whatever slack you can't. And you're in no way, shape, or form bound to your husband. You can just pick up and leave him and take everything from him anytime you feel. And he will then have to pay you money forever, even after you leave him. And you're still not equal to him in terms of duties and responsibilities. Nor will you ever be, because you're not capable of being that way. And the more you try to be so, the less happy you're actually going to be. That's because where before you had only one form of servitude to your family, now you have two, both to your family and your boss at work. And even though the one, your boss, is likely easier on you than your hubby's is on him, and your duties are likely to be lighter than those of your male counterparts, generally speaking, it's still two oppressors as opposed to one. You think you have it better now than you did before? Really? You don't. And that's why, by and large, women are less happy than they were before feminism. Oh, but at least you're liberated now, yes? You're free. But are you? Are you really free? No, you're not. Not really. You simply traded one form of servitude for two and substituted your female gender role in the relationship for the role of a man and a male gender role, so that you could become more like a man, only to find out that it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's just not all that feminism promised you, now is it? And if you're single and have no one, then as a woman, you have traded perceived servitude and oppression for nothing. Nothing whatsoever. No kids and no family, which, by the way, is what nature designed you for. How happy are you with that? How happy do you think you'll be in 50 years? Why don't you go talk to some old feminists who never had kids or a family, or some old feminists who tried to have both, only to have a fucked up family with multiple divorces left in their wake and who never found any real happiness? Yeah, go talk to them. See how happy they turned out. And all because you ladies wanted to free yourself from your obligations because they were boring and tedious. Oh, and you didn't get to experience as much of the world as men did. Yet you failed to see that men were and are as much of a slave as you women were. Slaves to their roles in society, and slaves to their women, and slaves to their children. You women were not and never have been oppressed. You were not servants. You simply had a different role in the relationship. Not better, not worse, just different. I think you ladies are going to find out that the so-called gains that you believe you've made aren't really gains at all, and that they'll taste very bitter once you're old and haggard. You might already be finding them to be bitter, as men run from you in droves because you're too much of a danger to become involved with. What with your laissez-faire lifestyle, your lack of commitment and loyalty, and the way you have altered society to serve you at the expense of those who make it possible for you to run away from your obligations as a woman in the first place, while we stay behind and fulfill our obligations as men. But no longer. I am the MGTOW Philosopher, and I wish you a good day. Take care.